Hello, one person watching. I know I've been about to go live for over an hour, but I was caught up in the Duran discussion on developments in the Ukraine. Obviously, this is a very significant time for the West because I see it as analogous to, well, somebody in a state of humiliating wrongness when you think you're calling for the support of your allies and associates, and they don't want to be associated with you anymore. So we know that India and China are quietly, discreetly walking away. But what has this got to do with the 22nd of February 2022? What happened that day? And the numbers are significant because it's the numbers are the same whether you read it forwards or backwards, and it's supposed to be significant and special and rare. And something did happen on the day that was immensely significant. It was the day on which Putin decided to recognize the republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. These were majority Russian regions in the east of Ukraine who identified as Russian and didn't want to be governed by the people who won the coup, the people in the West who looked west, who wanted to join the EU, who wanted to join NATO. And this is really the problem about NATO membership of the Ukraine. It should be pretty obvious really to anybody who is prepared to see sense on the matter that Russia would be upset by NATO encroachment. How many people are listening now? Are they able to understand the simple concept of a buffer state? What is a buffer state but a fence? So let us pretend that you have a piece of land and your neighbor has a piece of land and there exists a fence, and then one day your neighbor takes your fence down. How would you feel about that? Would you feel threatened? Would you wonder what he's going to do next after having taken down your fence? And obviously the fence is analogous to the buffer state of the Iron Curtain and the Warsaw Pact, and they've all become NATO, haven't they? Can't you understand that Russia would be a little upset? And so, on the 22nd of February 2022, Russia, Putin, decided to recognize the previously unrecognized republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. What was also supposed to have happened on the 22nd of February is that it is the birthday of George Washington, and the Americans have the tradition of getting a member of the Senate to read his speech, his farewell speech. And what they have done since 1896 is to alternate between a Democrat senator this year and a Republican senator the next. And um, so that was the American tradition, and it is performed. The speech is read out every year on the 22nd of February. Washington was born on 1732, but this American tradition was established in 1896. But it was broken. This year, it was broken, and nobody noticed. Obviously, the recognition of Putin of the independent republics of Donetsk and Lugansk discombobulated the American politicians so much that they basically adjourned the business of the day. What does this mean? Well, it certainly means that it was a day that is significant, both for Americans and for Russians and for the independent republics of Lugansk and Donetsk. But doesn't it seem sinister to you that this American tradition was broken today of all days? Was it a combination of events and divine intervention? Well, we don't know. We will never know. But the point is that what happened on the 22nd of February is immensely significant. Why did Putin recognize these republics? Because he wanted to be invited to sort out their problems and be seen as peacemaker. We know that it was a prelude to his military operation to regain control of the Ukraine. And it had to begin by entering the independent republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. We can have a look at the map of the area. So we know that Ukraine abuts Russia, and the independent republics of Lugansk and Donetsk would be, well, a kind of buffer state between Ukraine and Russia. Are we getting the idea of a buffer state now? Of course, the buffer state that Russia had was somewhat larger during the Cold War because it had the Iron Curtain. I think there were 7 countries that asked me to lose what they are. And after the Soviet Union fell, it was replaced by the Warsaw Pact. But the Warsaw Pact has now gone over to NATO. So I have put it to you that a buffer state is like a fence. And when your neighbour tears down your fence, you will wonder what worse there is to come from him, wouldn't you? It would only be natural for you to look at things in that way, particularly when your neighbour has been ignoring your opinions and your concerns for years, and they've been doing things that has caused you alarm and damage is, in a way, so very simple. But what does the speech 1796 the Americans now have been doing? This is not what your media will be telling you, not the BBC, not CNN, or any media that you have access to that you regard as mainstream. You will not be told of these things because, well, it's been ruthlessly suppressed because Western media is under the control of the CIA. The CIA promotes neoconservatism and neoliberalism, and this is how Western media have been told to present the news to its listeners and viewers. And if this is true, it ought to concern you that your source of information has been so corrupted. It has been so corrupted that you get to hear an alternative viewpoint only from me, little old me, with my little channel with, 282 subscribers. Another thing that I've noticed is that since the 22nd of February 2021, last year, I haven't really been able to engage any American at all who is prepared to discuss it with me. Yes, there have been a few who say, yes, they read it a long time ago, and when I point out to them that Washington obviously disapproved of political parties, I really haven't gotten very far with them because they can't accept that Washington would not have approved of the party system in America as it is now. He would have approved of the party system he would have approved more of the party system in Iran or China or any one party state. That is what he would have done. I had hoped to have an honest and rational discussion about this with just any American, but they don't care enough to even read the speech. I got as far as to get somebody one American to agree to stream with me, but he fell asleep, it seems, listening to the speech. There have been a few others I've approached, but there's no real interest in reading a speech that would have taken about half an hour to recite. But I assume that people read faster than they speak. I read faster than I speak. Will the tradition be reinstated next year? If there is a next year, if we haven't blown ourselves up with the hysteria that Western politicians are now engaged in? Do they know what they are doing? It would appear not. I have been listening to the Duran, and the comment is that Western politicians of the US vassal states are becoming ever more hysterical and calling for ever more extreme measures on Russia, which will actually hurt themselves. It'll hurt Europe. It has already hurt many consumers in Europe, rising energy prices. In fact, a lot of things that Western governments do have not been helpful to their own populace. And this is really what ought to concern people, that their governments do not have policies that have their national interest at heart. And therefore, when things get even more confused and frightening, there is even less prospect of there being a cool head with sound judgment making these decisions. This means that I have been all along that what we have now is precisely the wrong system, promoting exactly the wrong policy. And this is because the moral system of the West is kaput. Christianity is kaput. Conservatism is kaput because Christianity is kaput. And so there is no one at all in charge of promoting the national interest of any Western nation. What is to be done about this? I would have thought that the only thing to be done about this sort of thing is to acknowledge the nature of the problem. And the nature of the problem is that all Western nations are in fact matriarchies, allowing the worst people to be put in charge, the most unsuitable people to be put in charge of the ship of state, and then refusing to discuss it. What chance do we have when a country as significant as Russia, when you look at its territory, is in fact ignored? A few years ago, Putin actually said that liberalism is obsolete. It was briefly reported in the BBC and then forgotten about, and nobody cared. You may well ask, how does it help me even if I'm right, if no one listens to me? But that is really the crux of the matter. People don't care whether I'm right or wrong. They only care if I am, well, rich and famous and powerful. And that's the only kind of truth they are interested in supporting. If it doesn't look as if I'm going to make my point to anyone who matters, then they will not support me. But that is really the crux of the problem, that people cannot support the truth unconditionally, even though they don't think there's any prospect of being listened to. They will only support me if they think I'm going to win tomorrow, perhaps. And so it is, in fact, a display of lacking in principle. Of course, it is easy to support whatever side you think will win. But if you will only support truth if it doesn't entail risk on your part, then you don't really care about it that much, because it means that you will just as easily support lies if you think it will win in the short term. So this is fundamentally the moral problem of Western man. He is as risk averse as a woman. And this causes his women to hate him and despise him and want to support pro-immigration parties who will, they think, bring in better men that they can fuck and marry. Their timorousness, the timorousness of Western man, refusing to put two and two together and understand that the reason why women despise them is because of their undeniable cowardice, which makes them despicable to their women folk. This is something that they refuse to acknowledge. I suppose they think they can make do by going MGTOW, going gay, masturbating to porn and not having to marry a woman of their own race and pay for her children. That is how they think they are going to continue. If they have any sons, they will not be acknowledging that this is an existential problem of any society wishing to remain in existence and apart from others. They refuse to understand what I'm trying to say about the institution of marriage. This is also because most men, all men perhaps, in the alt-right who have YouTube channels bigger than mine are in fact unmarriageable bachelors who have no prospect or intention of becoming married fathers. That is why they don't see it as their role to support truth, because being atheists, they would only care to go to their graves, denying all that I have said, even though they know deep down it is the truth. But they cannot support it because they fear a backlash by their subscribers. Now, on Thursday, I was in the chat of the Jolly Heretic, hosted by Ed Dutton, who hosted a white Muslim convert who calls himself Islam for Europeans, one Rob DeFore, who is infamous for his timorousness. He told me he would not be discussing secular Quranism. I'm sure if he tried, he would have been dismissed by Ed Dutton, who does not care to discuss secular Quranism with either me or anyone else, because he knows it would trigger his subscribers who are overwhelmingly Islamophobic. All you have to do is go to Odyssey to see how hateful their comments are towards Islam. His stream on YouTube has now been deleted because that is his practice. He knows what he has to do to keep his YouTube channel and to keep his Islamophobic subscribers and viewers who overwhelmingly hate Islam. He has to pander to them. So whatever his views on Islam, he will feel he has to pander to the ignorant and Islamophobic in the hope of, well, short-term, to continue his source of income in his super chats. So this is really how they all think. They complain about their corrupt politicians, but really they are They adopt exactly the same tactic of denial. So we don't really know for sure whether their policy of ignoring me is due to an instinctive psychological response or a deliberate conspiratorial sort course of action. But it doesn't matter because the effect is the same. It has the purpose of suppressing the only solution, the only viable solution that Westerners have to the problem of matriarchy. If these people most affected by the policies of the matriarchy refuse to call it out, then what hope is there of actually addressing the problem, which they refuse to state? You see, they refuse to actually say what the problem is because they don't want to alienate women to whom they seek sexual access. So they are no different to the Western politicians who have shares in the armaments industries, who are in the pocket of the so-called defense industry. They know on which side their bread is buttered, and it's not on the side of truth. And this means they're not prepared to sacrifice anything for the cause of truth. And without truth, there can be no sound courses of action or sound arguments for sound courses of action. And this makes you easily defeatable by other nations and other cultures who do see that submitting to truth and exercising logic within the bounds of what their moral system requires them to do would be better than being immoral liars believing in nonsense. And this is the lot of the Western politician and those he presumes to govern. And unless they change their ways, there will be no improvement. And this is really all I want to say. It is because Western man refuses to stand up for the truth that all this has happened. They think it's more expedient to prefer lies because the lying side appears to be stronger than the truth-telling side until it becomes a matter of majority preference to not make any sacrifices to speak the truth. And that is why the election was not won by the man the Americans wanted to win. And that is why it has led to the incompetent foreign policy that will result in economic disaster and, well, it is global humiliation, isn't it? When you are abandoned by all the vassal states that you thought would be supportive. India's gone away. India is not supporting the proposal by hysterical European politicians to take Russia off the SWIFT system. They are busily now creating an alternative system to make sure that those Indians who work in the West or in Russia will somehow manage to send money back to their homeland. And talking about the unprincipled, I see Joe is there. He deleted an exchange he had with me on my stream call on what we should be loyal to. And I was saying we should be loyal to our principles. It won't just be the foreign policy humiliation of Western nations that is the only disaster. Of course, it will have economic consequences and also on the psyche of the average Westerner who sees that the wrong people are in charge, who sees the incompetence and the hysteria of his political leaders. That will be really the most disastrous outcome of all, when a government loses the confidence of its own, of the people it presumes to govern. They already hate their governments for doing, well, the opposite of what they want. The mental health issues of people who believe their political classes to be liars or madmen or evil people is unquantifiable, really. If you can imagine a child thinking its parents are mad and evil and really want to kill him. That is what most people in the West think of their government. Some of them blame the Jews, of course, but I don't. I suppose a case could be made of the Jews not teaching the Noahide laws to Gentiles well enough for the penny to drop that Christianity is idolatry and blasphemy, and therefore the soonest Europe should have, well, any nation aware of Islam, the soonest they could have adopted it was when they were aware that such a thing existed. I have been making the point for quite some years now. It seems obvious that if you wish to promote the national interest, you would have to choose the best religion available. And the best religion is the religion that is obviously the most objectively. Let me start again. The best religion must be the religion that is most fit for its purpose of maintaining the existence of the group. And the religion with the longest track record of maintaining the existence of the group would be Judaism. And you could say that, well, you really wouldn't be able to argue against the fact that the Abrahamic God is the most powerful God conceivable, and you can't really argue against the fact that Jews are the world's most ancient and powerful tribe, and you can't argue against the fact that the last 3 global empires have been Christian. But we also know that Christianity is kaput, because none of us know of any confirmed Christians, or hardly any. Do people in the chat know of any confirmed Christians in their social circles? I suspect not. So it means that Christianity is kaput. And it means that the West, in fact, has no moral system, because those who say that Christianity is kaput would also have to admit that liberalism is kaput. And the only reason why they would concede that Christianity is kaput is because they have also noticed that liberalism is kaput. I am, of course, saying there's only one rational and moral choice, and nobody who disagrees with me or dislikes my proposal has anything better to offer. But they think they can indefinitely ignore me and marginalize me and pretend they didn't hear, while themselves offering nothing better. But they are men who have no principles, who are suffering from a mental health issue or a learning disability. So what is a reason I have for not being in touch with people who do not suffer from learning disabilities or mental health issues? Unfortunately, it is now so corrupt that no one with a job dares to engage with me.